So I'm gonna have to do a little bit of writing down on cards before I get started. But yeah, we're gonna re-break Rebel Moon Part 1, blah, 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 and see if we can make a good story out of it. I realized today, while I was taking a shower, that you could consider this a half a movie if you're considering Part 1 the first half and Part 2 the second half, so maybe it's worth re-breaking it to just be a Part 1. I don't think that's going to improve anything about the movie, honestly. But we'll try that afterwards, because it's not that much different breaking a whole movie versus breaking a half movie. So if you want to hang out and stick with me. So basically the Dan Harmon story wheel, he did it when he was doing Channel 101, which was his film festival at, I think, Rob Schraub's house is what it was. And the idea was, he was finding that the directors and the filmmakers were having a lot of trouble figuring out how to do like traditional storytelling. The visuals would look good, the jokes would be good, but the actual story would be really unsatisfying. And so this is basically just Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey kind of stuff. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter how you outline it. The story moments and the story, you know, like escalations, there's no wrong answers, but it's also like you either tell a satisfying story the way audiences expect a satisfying story, or you don't. That's kind of what it is. And so the hero's journey is very much Western storytelling, and there's other ways to do it, but I found the hero's journey to be pretty useful. So if you, character in a zone of comfort, or hero in a zone of comfort, you establish the character, you establish the world, you establish things that are essential to start the story, and we have need. Then you find that the character needs something because they're not perfect. They need a change in their life, either by force or by want. Then you go on to the journey. This is usually the Act 2 moment that everybody talks about. Most people call it Act 2 being the big act, because usually it goes, you know, skinny act, double size act, skinny act. That's the 3-act structure if people talk about that. But again, you're not putting acts, unless you're doing TV, into the document anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But you go in the unfamiliar situation, that's where you round up the troops. But you go on your adventure of discovery, of self-discovery, but also usually literal discovery. Then you go into search, because once you're in the unfamiliar situation, now you have to remind yourself, okay, I'm actually trying to accomplish something. That's when you do the search. And then you go into find. You found what you were looking for. You got what you came for. Again, if you're rounding up the troops, this is when you have all or most of the troops. This is going to be a problem for this story. Once you find, you find. Pay the price. There's a price for something. Usually mythologically, there's literally a price in lives or in gold or in a trade or something. So there's a cost for everything. Return, going back to the start, and then changes. So the return and the change are kind of the final act, the finale, the everything comes to a head. So return is when you go back now that you've accomplished what you're going to go out to accomplish and apply it. And change is literally applying the change. Now capable of change, you've learned something. You've changed as a person. Your friends and people who went on this journey with you have changed as a consequence of the journey you've taken. You have more wisdom, you have more insight, you have more escalation in your life. Even cliffhanger movies like Empire Strikes Back, for instance, that's a change, because at the beginning of the movie, they were on the run, but they had this scrappiness about them. By the end of the movie, Luke is missing an arm. He figured out who his dad was. Like real devastating consequences that could not have been foreseen in the beginning come to fruition. So change is important. Okay. Ow. Character in a zone of comfort. We learn about space, and we learn about the Empire or whatever. The Regency or whatever. We have Space Farmer, has a charge moment with whose name is Gunner, I remember later. Now we have In the Hut with her adopted dad, who she's been with for 2 years, and he talks about this new hot hunter that she should probably marry and or have kids with, because that would make her part of the tribe. It's strongly implied. I'm editorializing a lot here. Then we have the big conversation in the Longhouse, where Big Daddy, who's the bald guy with the cool dreadlock, like braided beard stuff, says, hey, we're talking about fertility because we're farmers, and so it's not just the land, you also need to go get married and have kids. Or married, I don't know if married is a thing in this universe, but definitely having kids. Then she's back in the hut when it's implied that everybody is trying to have kids, and she talks to her new dad again, how she's not interested in the new hunter, or in the hot hunter, and her dad basically says the only way to get full membership is to marry this guy, and she's like, well, then I'll probably just bail. Going into the next chunk, so that was the zone of comfort, so it's established that she's sort of a traveler and that she's been here only recently, but she's kind of just doing her thing, she's happy being a farmer. Then we have the need something. The young girl shows up next time they're farming and goes, I heard noises coming from the hot hunter's place. Was that you? And she goes, it was not. The gag that my brother set up was that it was definitely her, and she's just slamming butt all over the galaxy when she gets a chance, but I think Zach and I are just trying to play it safe, PG-13 style, and no. And so she goes, no, I'm not interested in the hot hunter, and they look up and there's a big spaceship called the Dreadnought in the sky, and she panics and runs in her boots. It's a whole thing. Running in boots is so weird to me. Anyway, The whole community goes back to the longhouse and talks with Big Daddy about what they should do, because obviously if the military is here, they're going to try to subjugate them, which is 100% true. Then the space Nazis actually showed up. Oh, and then at the same thing, the main girl, our girl, stands up and goes, "Don't do this. I know I'm an outsider, but they're really terrible, so don't give them anything." And they're like, "Okay, whatever. You're an outsider." Admittedly, if she said any more information about who she was or her relationship to these military people, maybe they would have listened to her. So that's just a weird plot hole that I think needs a narrative explanation. Like, she needed to lie about something else in order to cover that lie. That's what I think. But anyway, then the space Nazis land in space Nazi uniforms. They're looking for rebels, but coincidentally, they're also interested in a new food supply once they establish that these people don't interact with rebels because they're bumpkins. Then the Big Daddy takes them to the longhouse, and basically Gunner, the coward, goes, "Oh, no, we have enough grain," after Big Daddy says no. And they kill the main guy, Snaggletooth guy, kills Big Daddy with his fancy stick, and everybody goes, "Oh my God, why would he do that?" To be fair, it was definitely telegraphed that he was going to kill Gunner the coward for acting out, but that guy's going to be bad, Meet the mystery guys, or the military guys. So basically the main space Nazis leave, but they leave like a group of like basically guards just to mess with them, just to make sure they don't renege on their deal. And you meet the kid, you meet the robot, and you meet the other guys that are all creeps. And they bring the girl, the cute girl, the young girl, I guess cute, hot, young. We'll stick with young, over for water. And clearly they're giving out the dangerous, scary, treat little girls badly vibe. Yeah, they also pick on the robot, so it's established they're not friendly with the robot either, but that's sort of a lesser thing. The robot, after getting mud all over him, has to go wash up, and the little girl, the young girl that they're picking on, goes and hangs out with him. It's the same girl, right? I think it's the same girl. And he tells her about the princess and how she was great or whatever, and that his king and queen are dead, so he doesn't have a job anymore. And she touches his face and it lights up, and that's an important moment because I would argue the robot is the most important character in the story by a mile. Anyway, the whole group is in the big house trying to figure out what to do, and they're like, well, we're just gonna have to deal with these people and be nice because the way to tyrants' hearts is being nice. And obviously our girl slinks off because she's like, well, that's not gonna work. Moving on. Her new dad catches her in their place packing and is like, 2 years ago, blah blah blah, I gave you a chance, you were gonna be part of this whole thing. And she's like, well, I'm going to leave. And he goes, well, you could find warriors, or one of them says it, I forget. You can find warriors to protect us. Even though there's a giant spaceship, like literally bigger than the dimensions of their entire community in space bearing down on them. So the logic of that is, I don't know. I would like some more information there. Maybe. Anyway, the army guys attack the young girl at night. I'm using attack, but they're doing exactly what you think they're going to do to this young girl. And, it's bad. The youngest guy protests because he seems to be a good person, but all the army guys except for the young guy prove to be as despicable as you think they are. And so our girl shows up and goes, leave him alone, and then Zack Snyder fights them all to defeat, except for the main guy. Then the robot wanders in and picks up a gun, and the main guy says, you need to shoot her, and he very quickly shoots the bad guy, which is a thing he's not supposed to be able to do because he's supposed to work for the king, blah, blah, blah. That was, again, the robot is by far the most interesting character in the story, like by a mile. So she's good now. She's killed all the bad guys with the help of the robot, who sort of just wanders, like runs off. He can run better than everybody else also, which is crazy. But they save the young girl. The town comes in and sees all the dead soldiers, and our girl mutters that they're going to have to fight now. Again, knowing what we'll know later on who she is, it's completely her fault. I just would like for that lie that she's basically telling, although she seems to be genuine about it, the lie that they're going to have to fight because of what she did to these guys. Knowing what we know later, they could have just turned her in and probably would have been forgiven. I mean, the military, maybe not, because the military complex likes to burn down villages, but it seems like that was a pretty decent option. Anyway, as she's leaving, the new dad gives her fancy gun back that sure looks like military gun stuff, and she's off to find other warriors now. And she's going to take Gunner because he's the only lead to find rebels or warriors or whatever. And also, he's the only other person in this town that she seems to actually have a real connection with at all. Moving on. We're going to search. We have the montage of them traveling, and like I said earlier, honestly, this is in sci-fi. Montages annoy the crap out of me, and they're useful for passing time or passing distance. And in sci-fi, I do kind of feel that they're more necessary than other genres because it's an opportunity to show more of the universe, more of the uniqueness of the world, although they're on the desert planet, so it kind of did the opposite. But they travel. And then they make camp, her and Gunner, and they have a chat, and we have 4 flashbacks to explain who she is. 4 flashbacks. 4 flashbacks. And we see she has like shaved head with like a flat top on top, and she got taken as a child by a commander who's obviously going to be the main commander of the entire story. He's the main big bad guy, and she gets mentored into this incredible warrior. That's the whole thing. It took 4 flashbacks to explain that. She was taken when she was 9. From 9 to 18, she rose up through the ranks to become a commander, and then sometime after 18 and now, and again, this woman in real life is in her 30s, so reasonably like another 10 or 15 years, something happened, and at some point, the king and the queen died at some point, and then she disappears and crash lands, and it's been 2 years since the crash landing. I don't know. That's as much as we're going to get about that ever. But it took 4 flashbacks, and the way she editorializes the flashbacks, it's not clear how much our guy Gunner actually learns, because we see it for what it is, but she's obviously not showing him that. I don't know. That seems like undercooked. They end up at the port city of Providence, which sure looks like Mos Eisley Spaceport. And they run into, they try to find their contact, and he's caught by a bounty hunter. And then you find the coolest walking robot handcuffs you've ever seen. So that's the end of him. So they're screwed. So they're going to wander into a cantina and out loud wonder about rebellion and rebels and specific names of people, just to see if anybody cares. Interesting strategy. Every time it happens in Star Trek, they get immediately arrested or kidnapped. But in this, they just sort of end up in a weird argument. There's a bar fight after talking to the brain guy, and you meet Charlie Hunnam in a leather jacket giving off a real, blonde Han Solo vibe. Yeah, and he says, I'll do it, and takes her to his ship, because he has a ship, because why wouldn't he have a ship? Of course he does. He's not Han Solo. He's definitely not Han Solo. Fine. Basically, when the agreement on the ship was, he's like, let's go on an adventure and find some guys. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Snaggletooth is on his ship, giving off a real Darth Vader vibe, where he's doing hookah all over his body, and then has like a weird, I don't know if this octopus thing is a pet or if it's medicinal, but he has a weird thing with an octopus thing on his ship. Real Darth Vader vibes. The gang, the ragtag group, lands at a planet with a slave owner and a hippogriff out back behaving badly. They're looking for Hot Slave Guy. So they meet Hot Slave Guy, and he's a slave, and they can't afford to pay for him. But for some reason, the slave owner's like, I like a bet. If you win, you can have everything, and if I win, you're all slaves. And they were like, great. Instead of money, let's do that. Great. So Hot Slave Guy has to break the hippogriff in order to win the bet, and he does. Just like every native in every white savior story, they put their heads together and they have an out-of-world connection to each other, and then they avatar fly for like 5 minutes. Where at one point the bird spikes the camera in a movie that is completely devoid of any self-awareness. An animated bird, a bird that does not exist in this reality or any other, looks down somebody animated this to look down the barrel of the camera. That's crazy to me, but it is what it is. He did it, they're all safe, blah, blah, blah. Ironically, when they leave, the bird kills the slave owner because of course he did, and then the hot guy who's going to be shirtless for the entire rest of the story goes, good girl or something, whatever, that's fine. Then they go to the mining planet, and the mining planet looks a lot like where Anakin Skywalker lost his limbs because of the high ground. I'm repeating myself, but I'm also doing this for the edit. So anyway, they end up in the mining planet. It looks like, wait for the dog to stop barking. They go to the mining planet. It looks like the place where Anakin lost his limbs because he didn't have the high ground. It is what it is. Some planets are like that, I suppose. They end up meeting the fighting lady who has lightsabers right away. But before they do, before they can hang out with her, she has to fight the spider lady, who is given enough time. The spider lady is able to explain her case, and she has a rock solid case for being the way she is, and yet she's still murdered because logic means nothing. But the spider lady was right. Honestly, between lightsaber lady and spider lady, if I was putting together a ragtag crew of good people, I probably would have gone with spider lady because she seems awesome. Anyway, they're back on the ship. It's another flashback where our girl is telling Gunnar the Coward. Another thing is at some point she was such a good warrior that she became the personal guard of the princess, and she talks about, and she way over summarizes it because we see the princess literally bring a dead bird back to life, but the way it's editorialized, she says there's been on more than one occasion the princess has done crazy things. Okay, sure. Anyway, moving on. We go to the Gladiator Moon to meet the general, who's an alcoholic, and he's passed out in the corner. I think that's right out of Seven Samurai, but it's also right out of everything else. I think Magnificent Seven, which is just a Western version of that, did the same thing. Yeah, he's the general, and it's our guy who's literally in Gladiator. So, Anyway, the bad guys kill the Maori guy who was the spy that they were supposed to find on the other planet. I think the only reason this scene exists is to show off that the walking handcuffs robot has like a gun in the back, and you can put it in the back of somebody's head and sort of poke them like you do with a cow. No young men, no time for young men, or whatever the hell that movie's called. Anyway, No Country for Old Men, poking cattle thing. Anyway, then they meet King Levitica, who sure looks like a Mon Calamari to me, but hey, some aliens are fish. Then the rebels show up, and she pleads with the rebels, and the brother rebel joins, and a couple other of the rebels' friends join, and then the girl with the rest of the rebels leave. So now they have a couple ships. So they do a space convoy where a bunch of ships, and then their big goofy ship that Charlie Hunnam drives is on its way back, and that's when Charlie Hunnam and her have a charged moment where he basically says, I've thought about it, and you're making me a better person, sexual undertones, and I'm joining your crew, which was weird to me because I just assumed based on the fact that he was helping her go find everybody that he was already on the crew, but what are you going to do? So anyway, he joins, blah, 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 foreshadowing. The Nazis are on the planet with King Leviticus, and they kill him, but the rebels don't seem to be there. Sure. Now the rebels, or our gang goes to the Cloud City. It's a city in the clouds. It's literally a cloud city. Where has been a movie where there's a cloud city? I don't know. I wonder if there's going to be a person who gets brutalized and then thrown off the Cloud City. I wonder if that's going to happen. Yes. Blue Guy and Charlie Hunnam betray them on the dock of the Cloud City and so the handcuff things pop out and grab a bunch of people and explains how every one of these people they found have bounties on them, and so that's explained because it was really unclear to me, even the second time I watched it, like why Charlie Hunnam was doing this. He's a bounty hunter. Where are bounty hunters from? Not Star Wars. Snaggletooth shows up and does a walk and talk where he's like, I knew I recognized you in a village full of all these white Aryan people who farm, and you're, very dark skinned with dark hair and super, super hot. So how would I have been able to tell you out of the crowd? Yeah, you're the daughter of the like warlord. You're the most famous outlaw in the history of the world. Anyway, the Snaggletooth guy tries to make Gunner, our coward guy, I guess, paralyze people. It was unclear whether the gun thing in the back of the handcuff robot paralyzes them or kills them, but he decides not to do it and instead pegs Charlie Hunnam with it, which is pretty awesome, and then frees everybody, and there's a big battle. Ultimately, our girl and Snaggletooth end up on a 1v1 duel, isolated, after a bunch of ships shoot a bunch of other ships, but the only ship that doesn't get shot is Charlie Hunnam's ship. I guess it makes sense now because they had a deal, but anyway. She duels with him, and then she breaks his staff, which is such a big deal, and then shoves him off the platform. To be fair, Luke jumped off the platform after he got his arm sliced, so there you go. And then we have heroes talking about speeches on this burning platform, how it's time to blah, blah, blah. And then they go back to the farm planet, and you see them all ride the horses with the CGI faces into the sunset, and you see the feral robot wearing antlers now, sort of being crazy, and he has a staff. It's kind of awesome. And then back at the ranch on the Nazi ship, they recovered Snaggletooth guy. He's in bad shape, but they're going to plug him in because he's an android, kind of. And instead of, like, you know, reviving him, they do like a Darth Vader call where he has to go talk to the boss, which is her daddy mentor person, and then he comes back and he's barely alive, and that's that. There you go. That's the movie. Okay, so let's try to okay. Person in the zone of comfort. I think the person in the zone of comfort is fine, except the way stuff is. So you need, go, search, find, take, return, change. Let me just think about this. Zone of comfort, want something, enter to a new place, adapt to the new place, find what they were looking for, pay the price for what they were looking for, get back to where they wanted to start from, and now they're capable of change, having learned their lesson. Zone of comfort is her being a space farmer. Excuse me. I just don't feel like we have enough information about her, but for the sake of we're going to learn more later, benefit of the doubt, I'm more or less okay with this, although there's like a whole lot of harping about like fertility and getting married and all this stuff, which does not come up again in the rest of the story. So that's sort of, I feel like that was just, it set us up for like the push and pull between being a married person and having a quiet life versus going on an adventure. But there was no push and pull because she had made it like frighteningly clear that she was not interested in being married. She was only there for the quietness, and so as soon as the quietness went away, which is when the ship shows up, she was going to leave. So honestly, I probably would have changed the stuff around a little bit in the first chunk, the zone of comfort, just because the marriage, where's the marriage stuff going to? It gets super harped upon, and obviously she's not having it. So either she needs to be much more interested in marriage. Maybe she is interested in this hunter guy, but she realizes the call to action to go off and fight space war instead. Because then later we see I don't think she's married, but she's in love with a guy who dies on the battlefield. Or maybe she is married at like 18. So I don't know. There's something about marriage happening in the first thing that's weird, but also the fact that she's concealing who she is to the wrong people. Like, I feel like the wrong people she's hiding from, and then the other wrong people she's obviously who she is to. So there's something weird in the first one, and then want something. We're still on the planet, which I guess is fine because it's still technically Act 1, but like we're stuck on the planet. Something bad happens, Dreadnought shows up. They argue about grain for a very long time. I don't remember Luke arguing about moisture farming as long as this, but who knows? It does seem like it took a long time on that Tatooine planet on episode 4 anyway. Space Nazis come and do their whole space Nazi thing, but she's not even in the second thing. So maybe that's the problem, is the second thing, she's passive. She's active in the first thing when the Dreadnought shows up because she runs away. So she's actively running. And then we have Longhouse, Space Nazis, Longhouse, and then the last scene is where she shows up. So there's 3 whole scenes where she's just like literally standing in the back of the room. If this is her story, why is she standing in the back of the room? She's passive. I think that's where we're having so much trouble in the second strip, is if it's so important that we understand her point of view and her choices, we can't have her exist in the back of the room. If she's in the back of the room, we need to be looking from the back of the room to the conversation on the other side of the room, where the camera's in the wrong space, like mentally, is I think the issue. Because obviously she knows these, like, there's no new information to her about these space Nazis, but we also don't have any information of her. Like, so the only thing that we're getting is new information about space Nazis to us. She's not doing anything. So these three in the middle on the second row, I think that needs work. That she needs to be doing something. She basically, this entire segment, number B, she's just packing to leave. That's the whole thing. And then reluctantly, she gets forced to protect the young girl, who's her friend kind of, from getting attacked, or the other word. And the robot also helps. So it's not even just her. But it makes sense that the robot would be in the back because the robot is not a main character. Although I would still argue the robot is the main character of the whole story and should have shown up in the first part. But then it literally is Star Wars because the robots are the first thing you see in Star Wars. I don't know. The second segment, yeah, she just packing is not gonna work. She either needs to leave or she needs to change their minds. We need to understand from her point of view stuff. This would be where if the wedding, marriage stuff, having kids stuff is so important in the first segment, this is where that pays off. And so if we're setting up that either she wants to marry the hot guy who can hunt, or she doesn't want to marry the hot guy and hunt and marry Gunnar the coward, this is where that pays off, where she goes, as much as I would like to, I have to go to war now, or he gets killed, or something else, and then forces her to go to war. But we don't have any of that. As a matter of fact, the good hunter guy, he's hanging out. He's cool. When they come back at the end of the movie, I think he's there. So he's basically Liam Hemsworth, Hunger Games-ish. Anyway, so I think that's what's wrong with that, is there's no symmetry there. They're setting up something that doesn't get paid off, so we need to set something up more correctly and then have it pay off here and have the escalation go to on the adventure now. That's where we're going to go, which is C. Robot and the young girl lights up. I'm totally wrong. She doesn't do anything in this because the fighting the bad guys is way over here. So she literally doesn't do anything for these scenes. So from card 7 to card have to fight. So from card 7 to card 13, she's literally just hiding and packing. So that's a disaster. It's nice that we learn about the robot and the young girl, because the robot is the most important, interesting character in the whole thing. People are sad in the longhouse because their boss is dead. Yeah. So again, it's sort of like an ensemble of people. Maybe that's the issue, is it starts off a singular character seems to be the focus of the story, where people telling her stuff that she's clearly not interested in. The second column is, again, people telling her stuff and she disagreeing with them, but we have sort of a her versus the ensemble. And then by now we just have the ensemble. Like, she's not even there. She's off packing, and it's all of a sudden the story seems to be about the ensemble, but it's not. The ensemble is literally just a bunch of scared farmers. They're not main characters. And so the fact that, like, Gunnar is there technically, but he doesn't represent the ensemble. So that maybe there's a focus problem here, where obviously she's off doing something. We don't know what it is. That's annoying, but in a large multi-character ensemble story, that's not a deal breaker. You just got to go to the next character. But Gunnar's a freaking wallflower too. Gunnar just sits there. So I guess that's a problem, is if she's not going to do anything in B and C, which she should, I feel like that's the only way it's going to make sense. We have the robot, which is useful, but he ends up not being part of the ensemble because that's obviously going to be the next movie. So that's useless for our purposes. So Gunnar needs to be the point of view of the ensemble, but he also doesn't do anything. So either she needs to be doing something in B and C, or Gunnar needs to be doing something in B and C that affects everything. And then we have, 13, 14, the guys attack the young girl, and she saves the young girl and kills all the bad guys, and the robot does too. Honestly, the setup payoff for the robot is tight. Like, if you wanted this to be like a 15-minute short film, just all the robot scenes, that's your movie. Satisfying, beginning, middle, end. It has a you, it has a need, it has a go, it has an adapt. I mean, honestly, it's crazy. So good job on writing robots, I guess. They attack the girl, and then the town shows up, and she says, have to fight. But again, she made that decision when she cornered the guys attacking the girl. So that moment came like a whole scene too late. Yeah, I feel like honestly those beats need to switch. She needs to decide that everybody has to fight, and then she saves the girl. New dad gives her gun back. Sure, but again, we have this budding relationship that we're learning about her and her new dad, which will never get addressed again because her new dad is not part of the story. So we just have too many unnecessary. It's unfocused. There's a bunch of non-consequential characters in the first chunk that aren't in the rest of it because obviously, yeah. And the Star Wars solution is they all get barbecued. But I honestly, when they were coming back at the end into the sunset, I thought the sunset was the burning town, just because that was the vibe I was getting, which would have been very Star Warsy. But that's why Luke went on to the thing. He had no home to come back to. She literally comes back to the home. Anyway, we're going to search. We got the montage travel with Gunnar. Again, even though they established chemistry with Gunnar at the beginning, she seems to have nothing to say to him on this travel. And then she gives him 4 flashbacks, which explain somewhere between enough and too much information for the rest of the story. But again, he's the only one that learns this information other than us. And so he's learning the escalation of who she actually is and what that actually meant, and should be probably pretty pissed that she didn't tell everybody this like 2 days ago when his daddy got murdered and they're getting subjugated by the military, because she would have known all this stuff. Anyway, they go to the port city of Providence. It's, yeah, sure. But again, this actually might be when they realize the bounty hunter caught that guy. That actually seems like a real scene where they show up and they go, oh crap, things have changed. Now they're both on the same page because they went from having a plan to not having a plan. And then they go to the cantina, and it's obviously, you get a little bit of information, then you get a big fight. And then at the end of the thing, they even quip out loud, which I found to be, maybe that was the moment of self-awareness where he goes, that's the plan. And she goes, that's the plan. It's like, if you're going to work together, maybe be on the same page with the whole plan. But again, that could be a character explanation. We've established that she's guarded and jaded and doesn't relay information, but he also doesn't press her on anything. And so after that moment where he goes, that's the plan, and she goes, that's the plan, that's his into all the other times where she's not telling him something for him to go, you need to tell me what's going on because we're a team, we're a partnership. And he doesn't do that because he has no agency in this story. He's literally the coward of the story. But even then, the coward in a critical moment of her failing would have been like, what do you need me to do if she's the planning person? Okay, moving on. Cantina, Charlie Hunnam's ship, blah, 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 sure. Then they go to a bunch of places. I have nothing nice to say about all these places hopping around finding people because it's basically the same as the montage and it kind of plays out the same way. Yeah, it's the part of the, it's Save the Cat calls it fun and games. It's a hard part of the story because it's the part that makes the trailer usually, other than the finale stuff that makes the trailer, but it's also, because it's so amorphous and it's hard. It's the hard part of stuff because it's not necessarily clear what you're striving for. In this case, it's literally going, we need a person, let's go find a person. We need a person, let's go find a person. Also, they didn't have anybody say no, which is very confusing to me. And they didn't have anybody that they wanted and they couldn't get, and they got somebody else. We kind of get that at the end because the brother of the rebels dies. So we kind of have that at the end, but even then, I don't know. Yeah, it's like ABC. And so there's nothing, yes, plot happens, but we don't even really get character interactions because we're just learning about each character. Basically, each character gets to hold the mic and go, here's me, here's what I'm doing. Okay, my time's over, here's the mic back. Like, it's not an ensemble, there's no chemistry, there's no character interaction, there's no characters with overlapping ideals other than maybe Charlie Hunnam's character and her. Because obviously Gunnar is just, he's good with whatever she's doing, so that doesn't help. The rest of the characters seem to too, and the only person that doesn't is Charlie Hunnam, but his character is also agreeing with her, and it's revealed later that's because it was all part of his, devious plan to sell her out. There's no conflict, there's no negative interaction. Everybody's on the same page. We need you for this. I don't know. Okay, I'll do it. That's the thing. That's where TV, I feel like, does a better job than movies sometimes. Is if the ask is, we need this, or can you do this, that's when you cut to commercial. That's when you cut to something else. You come back and they will either answer the demand, or they will have, we're on our way because they have answered the demand. If you have the setup and the payoff of something big, especially plot wise, in the same scene, what's the point of having an additional, like, what's the point? What are we doing here? Like, and it's fine to have that occasionally, because some people, you just go, hey, can you do this for me? And they go, yeah. But a lot of times they don't. So to have it happen, let's see, 1, 2 with the hippogriff guy, 3 with the spider lady, and so 3. It happens 3 times in a row. It happens almost a third of the movie, where somebody goes, "Can you do this for me?" And then they go, "Hold on, okay, yeah, I've decided yes." I think the only time where it's not directly in the same exact scene is a spider lady, because she has to first fight the spider lady thing, the Jedi. I don't know. So you can, yeah, don't say, "Will you hold my baby?" And then the very next scene is, the end of that scene is, okay, now I'm holding the baby. Now I've holded the baby. Now I'm holding the baby. Like, you got to go, "Will you hold my baby?" Cut to something else, because there's tension there. There's a lot of people are like, "I'm not touching your baby. What are you talking about? Your baby's covered in poo. You're going across the galaxy. What is on your baby?" And then the next scene, you got baby poo all over your face, and you're holding the baby. Like, that's the bit. That's the comedy version. That's also the dramatic version. So the find stuff I find annoying. And honestly, if we're doing find, the spider lady is find. The princess is the more information find, talking about the princess. We're finding the gladiator guy, who immediately says yes. King Levitica. Yeah, so there's all of this is fine. So we actually have to, so let's just do this. Let's put these back. We'll have to move where this thing takes place. We're taking too long on find, basically. Like, if this is exactly the movie, we're taking too long on find. That's really what it is. So where does take place? It's probably killing King Levitica, right? So there's maybe take, meet the brother, space convoy. So there we go. So there's the end of find is here, and then we have take. So let's just move this up. We have this fight spider lady. We have the gladiator, bad guys. So there's a problem too. We either have too many people, or honestly, I think it's a plotting issue. Nothing is. We're stuck. We have. If we're going to find all these people, other things need to be happening more so than they are, because we basically just have, they take a step forward, the bad guys take a step forward. They take a step forward, the bad guys take a step forward. But because they're already one step ahead, they step. And eventually the bad guys are going to take 2 steps and catch up. So nothing is, like, we're not having escalation. So we should have maybe like a near miss here. Even near miss here with the bad guys catching them, and then the bad guys catch them. Like, that's how it should be. It should be catching up, a near miss, and now the bad guys have caught them. But instead they're on their adventure, and the bad guys are just like watching them through the binoculars kind of thing. But there's no tension there. There's no escalation there, unless the bad guys have Jeopardy too, which they don't. Because they could do this all day. They have infinite resources. They're not going to run out of fuel or whatever. And then we have take. Take, I don't know, maybe take is, so you have to pay the price. Well, the price is the betrayal, snaggletooth the recognizer, the big battle, 1v1 duel. So honestly, the return, so we just don't have a last act, really, is what it is. We don't have a last segment of beats, because that's your take, because this middle segment was too long. And so they return, they go back to the farm planet and the Nazi ship. So we just don't have a last chunk. We don't see how they're capable of change. We see it in the trailer for the next movie. We see them getting guns together, which again is a weird ask for me because they're looking up and seeing a giant ship. So how are they going to pew pew a giant ship like that? But sure, for the sake of sci-fi, sure. We just don't have a last segment. Yeah, so that's really what it is. It's man, this whole movie is just all over the place. All right, so we have in segment A, we're talking about too much of the wrong stuff, and we're not seeing enough of our main girl. That's really what it is. In section B, we're not paying off the stuff we talked about in section A because the main girl is ostensibly not in it. In section C, well, actually, I'm kind of cool with section C for the most part. Honestly, yeah. Section D is all the traveling. It's boring, but sure. I'm not super happy about the 4 flashbacks in the same conversation, but hey, whatever. Section C and D are actually in pretty good shape. Section E is both too big and also like undermining the pacing of everything because they're just going, we need this, we're getting this. We need this, we're getting this. We need this, we're getting this. There's no escalation. There's no character moments. There's no overlap. There's no setbacks. They're literally getting what they want. This was a problem I had with, which Star Wars is it The Last Jedi? Is it the one where they're just driving in a straight line for the entire Last Jedi? Is that what it was? And so Finn and whatever her name is, Finn and Rose go off on like a side quest and they go, we need this, therefore this, we need this, therefore this, we need this, therefore this. But again, since everybody else is driving in a straight line, there's no jeopardy there because no matter what they do, we need this, therefore this. Everybody else is going in a straight line, so you just have to look and see where they're gonna be and just be there. So it's the kind of same thing here. They're just set up, payoff, set up, payoff, set up, payoff. There's no escalations, there's no reversals. And even if you don't have that, which is fine, character moments. One of the stronger things about the original Marvel team-up stuff, before the recent stuff, is Thor was not cool with certain people. Mark Ruffalo's character was not cool with certain people. Tony Stark was a dick. Like there were interactions that would escalate. It became Iron Man versus Captain America. That's what Civil War was about. Is Iron Man has his point of view on things and Captain America has his point of view on things, and they're incompatible. And so as soon as somebody pushes one of them one direction, the other person has to interfere, interact, counterattack. There's none of that. Everybody seems cool. If anything, they all seem like roommates. It's super weird. So these people need to, if they're not, like having outside forces be a problem, because clearly not, they all succeed at absolutely everything they're doing. Inside forces, the super hot guy who has no shirt is gonna have to have beef with somebody. Maybe the sword lady, because he's super hot and he's like, you're gonna burn me. Like if you turn on your sword by accident, I don't have anything to protect my giant abs from getting absolutely torched. Like what the hell? Can you put those away, please? Like there needs to be. That was like schlocky 90s stand-up comedy. But my point is, there's no incongruity. There's no problem. Part of it is our main characters, the two, our girl and then Gunnar, are stoic and quiet and passive, which is a nightmare. But even if that was the case, somebody in the group is going to be loud and try to take control, and that's going to be a problem. If you have a quiet, stoic leader, you're going to have somebody who thinks they know better step up because they see a void in the power, they see a power vacuum, they're going to have to interfere. We don't have that. We don't have any of that. So there needs to be conflict here because, again, they already left King Levitica when he gets killed by the space Nazis, so that ostensibly doesn't affect them. Eventually, they're going to get the news and be like, "Oh, bad, all sad. It was all of our faults," but it doesn't affect them. They're not going back to King Levitica. They don't have a problem there. So basically, that was just like a consequence for us. Yeah. In addition to that, the betrayal. Yes, it's a betrayal, but the good guys didn't really lose anything. I mean, obviously the brother from the rebels died and a bunch of the rebels got killed, so they lost a bunch of rebels, but also they only had the rebels for like a scene and a half, so we don't even know anything about the rebels. We don't know what most of their faces look like at this point. There's nothing there. So there was really nothing lost. They were, gathering warriors. They had a standoff and they won ostensibly, except they lost the one rebel guy and therefore his rebel friends, who we don't have any information about them anyway. So they like ostensibly won a battle in a way that you're not supposed to win at this point. Like, you can't just get the band together and have them work. Even if you're going on a non-American, like a non-Western storytelling motif, instead of doing, Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, even if you're not doing that, if you do the anime structure, friend's journey, fight, failure, learning, you gotta fail before you can learn. There's no failing here. They didn't have a problem. She ostensibly beat the guy with his own stick. She beat him with his own stick within an inch of his life. What is there to learn from that? There's nothing to learn from that. And then they go back and they're like, well, now it's time to buckle down. What is, like, how to fix this? They need to completely redo the first chunk, because it needs to not be about getting married or being part of the society, because she's established that she's not part of the society and she's not interested in being part of the society. It seems like the only part of the society in the first chunk that she likes is farming. She can do that anywhere. That's not necessary. Second thing needs to pay off the first thing that's already broken. The third thing I think is kind of fine, except for the attacking of the girl is really on the nose, but I'd rather have that than not, because it gives people something to do, and it's a good way to differentiate bad guys from good guys, even though, you don't have to attack a girl to prove you're a bad guy. You just don't, but it's better to have it than not. The search stuff is very mundane to me, but that's fine. The find stuff is an absolute disaster and completely undermines the thing. And I think the bulk of why this movie feels and is so long is in this search stuff, because we're seeing new things, which is exciting, because sci-fi, it's nice to see new things and interpret things and compare the way things are there versus the way our society, like all that kind of stuff is fun. But we don't really have that. We're just meeting individuals and they're saying like one catchphrase and then they're absolutely dominating. So there's no conflict there. There's basically no plot. There's no tension. There's no narrative thrust. It's just, we're just in stale air for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 scenes. We're in stale air for 30 plus minutes. I think it's closer to like 40. That's crazy. And then we have the take, which has consequences. Yeah, okay. I mean, yes, this stuff is paying off stuff that was set up earlier. I feel some kind of way about the fact that they absolutely dominate in the big showdown, where usually, the take or right before the take is the big failure in a movie. Like the low point should be like right here. So King Levitica meets the rebels. That should be a low point. Maybe the rebels look at him and go, a bunch of farmers and a crazy girl who's definitely not the most famous outlaw in the entire history of the universe. Hard pass, you guys suck. That could be good. That could be devastating, because now they have nowhere to go. If the rebels say, kick rocks, now they don't have any, now they really have nothing, because their whole thing was, we need to get a band together, but also we need rebels. So if the rebels bail on them, then that's useful, because now what are they going to do? They're going to have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and figure some shit out. But instead, half the rebels are like, sure, yeah, we'd love to. Great. Then the take so that was take. So everything after take is everything below take. So everything in take, paying the price, they're not paying a price here. They're gifted a Charlie Hunnam who's a liar. We don't know that King Leviticus was killed, so that means nothing. They show up at the Cloud City because they still need another guy. but it turns out that it's the betrayal that Charlie Hunnam was setting him up for. So honestly, that was the low point. But again, it's not a low point because they go from having a low point to having the most ostensibly successful battle in the history of people stumbling around on a dock. Like, it's crazy. So, and then the return, we have hero speeches, but we don't have a change. So even if we say back on the farm planet and we see the feral robot and that kind of stuff, and these are the changes, they've not done anything. She's nothing about who she is at this point is a difference or a return to who she was at the beginning, other than the fact that she's going to be a farmer again, but she's not. She's going to be a warrior again. So she's even not doing that. In addition to that, we have a feral robot. Awesome. Love it. It's the best. And then we have a Nazi ship, which is ostensibly a post-credit scene for all intents and purposes. There's no change here. Nothing's changed. So I'd say the proportion of this story that is compatible with even just the story wheel, which is just a basic Western storytelling order of events, honestly, because there's no chemistry, there's no character interaction, so we don't have any of the actual story stuff. Story isn't things happening. Story is how characters feel about things happening. She doesn't feel shit. And most of them seem to not. The hot guy that's wearing a shirt seems to have the most emotions, and his emotions are happy and impressed. Yeah. So let's try to. So having said that, can we call this the first half of a longer story, so that you goes all the way to here, meet the bad guys, maybe. Okay, we can do that. So the answer to, can this story be fixed easily? There's so much to fix. I honestly I don't even know where I would start. To take this movie and just recut it to make it work, I don't think it's possible. I really don't, even though you could definitely easily cut out 30 plus minutes of the story. I don't know where you would cut, because I just honestly don't. But for the sake of the counter argument of, this is the first half of a larger story. All right, sure. Let's try to make that work. I think it's going to be even less compatible because it kind of fit more than it didn't. Person in his own comfort. So let's see, robot and young girl. So that's the zone of comfort. So really, the end of the zone of comfort is attacking the girl, right? Because that's when things really escalate. In a way that you can't go back to. So let's call attacking the girl be the thing that sets things off. B, right? Needs. You need something. You need to protect people in your farm, basically. Attacking the girl. Town sees it. Dad says, here's your gun back. And so now she has to go on a travel because the thing she needs isn't here. Sure, I could buy that. Go, I guess, would be hanging out with Charlie Hunnam. I would buy that. I would buy Charlie Hunnam being the go part, because now you're going on the adventure. So now we have all this adventure. And search. So where does search happen? Space convoy, hurt. I guess. I mean, where do you adapt to stuff? The betrayal. So right here. So you could do the search here and here and here. So now you're adapting to it because there's a betrayal, and now you have to fight, and then they come back and they have speed. Like, even if you just look at it, clearly the let's go find a bunch of warriors stuff, because it doesn't affect anything other than just getting more characters. There's no additional escalations, there's no reversals, there's no changes. It's still stagnant, and it's still way too big for the rest of it. If anything, the need is too small, but you could even just if you just put the need, just start the actual robot stuff as need, it's still too small. Yeah. So no, I don't think if you call the part one of a two-part story the first half of a Western story, I don't think so. I just don't think so. There's too much dead air, too much dead time finding people on fancy planets because there's no consequences and there's no escalations, there's no setbacks, there's no problems. It's for a ragtag group of losers who are farmers who are promising money but don't have any money, it seems like they got deep pockets, because every single time they have anything that they're up against, it's paid for. It's like God will provide kind of crap. There's nothing up against what they're doing at all. So that's what it is. God, it's frustrating because, like, Don't Worry, Darling. Let me just go to this. So the deal is, Don't Worry, Darling was like 75-80% a story. It just had some weird choices and motivations and like missing information. And once you fixed that, you had an incredibly tight and incredibly well told story. It just wasn't assembled correctly. Whatever this is called, Rebel Moon, a child of fire, ... whatever. Anyway, Rebel Moon Part 1. It's just an absolute mess. And even if you trimmed out, like if you were an editor and you came in and you were like, well, we could trim this down to whatever it needs to be a satisfying story with what we have. The only way I could conceivably cut this, that I would be like, holy crap, we've done it. This is drum tight. Like, this is undeniable, is if we just have all the scenes with the robot and it's a short film. It's like a Pixar style R-rated film about a robot, which is like 5 scenes or 4 scenes. It's just a mess. It's just an absolute mess. And that's not even counting all the other criticisms. The fact that it's shot in shallow depth of field for 99% of it, but it's a sci-fi movie, so you want to be able to see stuff, is annoying. Counterpoint to that argument, Rogue One did the same thing and it looked great. And I think the difference is, when you needed to see really wide things and not just a character with blurry, goofy stuff behind him that you can't see, you saw it. In Rogue One, when you needed to see the giant spaceship, you saw it. In this movie, it was still mostly out of focus. So it's just like, is there a satisfying, useful movie in all of these scenes cut together? Short of that robot, I don't think so. It's the stuff that's in there isn't the stuff you need to make a story with. Characters need to interact. A character's point of view and their motivations are going to drive how they talk and speak and interact with people. And then the other character that they're talking to is also going to have different motivations and the different way of speaking and different priorities. And they're going to offer up a different type and amount of information than the first character. And it's the push and pull that creates camaraderie, that creates conflict, that creates enemies, that creates friendships, that creates alliances. And there's very little of it here. The worst outlier of all of this, that stands out the most to me, is her relationship to Gunnar the farmer, because his whole thing is he's the farmer. The only time he's interesting in the entire thing, actually there's 2. The first one is when he disagrees with Big Daddy, which gets Big Daddy killed. That's the first time. The second time is when he actually helps them by unlocking them from the robot handcuffs things. Every other time he is literally nodding in agreement with whoever he's standing next to, because he has nothing to offer, no personality, even though he's established as the second character we meet. So he is, by just the logic of introductions, the second most important person in the story behind her, if you're going to call that how you build things out, to have sort of symmetry. she's the most important person. We see her first. We see her struggling. The second person, and the person that she interacts with first, that seems to have chemistry, seems to have a past with, seems to have some sort of interaction with, is this guy who offers nothing. And he does for the rest of the story. So it's like, I don't know. I liked the space stuff. If I wanted to watch Star Wars scenes, I would just go watch Star Wars. I don't think that's a controversial idea. Honestly, the coolest part of the coolest part of the movie, I think, other than the robot handcuff things, because I think those things are awesome, is when the ship opened up a rift and came through, and then the rift closed. That was fun for me. I enjoyed that. I thought there was going to be a lot more of that in the movie, and there wasn't. So, I don't know. Is the second half going to vindicate the first half? Is the second half going to be considered the second part, and you need to watch the first part and then the second part for it to make sense? I mean, for it to make sense, probably, but it's obviously not going to make sense because this didn't really even make sense logically. It made sense in that things happened, but the logic of it makes no sense. What a mess. What a mess. Yeah. This would be, if this script showed up in a workshop with me, it would take, if you're given an hour and a half to workshop this script, which is definitely not enough time, we would get into the first 25%, and I would have to email the notes for the other 75%, which would probably be like 10 or 15 pages of notes, because this is just, I think my, if I was a screenplay reader and I was just given this to do coverage on, I would just be like, pick some things that are important to you in this story, write that, start over, write that. Don't include what you already have, because it's tedious and it's going the wrong way almost every single time. So just pick the 5 things, the 5 critical moments that you want to write to, and write to them. And it'll be clean, it'll be simple. You don't have all this extra stuff. And then you can find spaces for all these extra things that you want to put in on the outside. But don't expand the script to do it. Just find a place to put it in. Oh, hey, we're on a moon. Maybe that's the time to have the 3-star system and the dreadnought coming in with the whoosh, that whole thing. Like you can put stuff in while characters are doing something. I feel like maybe that's my biggest criticism of how Zack Snyder tells a story is, it's either or. You either have an epic fight scene with speed ramps and slow motion and moving around in 360 degrees kind of stuff, through a 3D space, or you have characters making choices that drive the plot forward. And on this one, he seemed so convinced that the visual spectacle was what was the most important thing about this, which if you're spending 25 years pitching this, then maybe you're right. But it's at the cost of having basically no character interaction, no character moments, no characters making choices that escalate the story to drive the plot forward. You're literally just having plot in order to sew the moments of visual set pieces together. Yeah, so what a mess. Although I didn't record on my main camera, which I'm kicking myself for, but as far as what this was, I'm exhausted. It felt good. My brain feels good because it was a good exercise, but goddamn, this was a nightmare. But at least I don't have to think about this anymore. So, like, share, subscribe, whatever. Catch you next time.